Hey, everybody. Welcome to my side of the crystal ball. We're broadcasting from Toronto, Canada, the most culturally diverse city in the world. Home of Blue Jays, Raptors, Maple Leafs, and Canadian psychic Lindsy Milne. That's me. Welcome to my side of the crystal ball. We've got a stellar show for you tonight. My guest is Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Besides being a singer, dancer, performer, booking agent that she did in her earlier days, and even still today, besides that, she is a practicing licensed hypnotherapist with a specialty dealing with people that have had alien encounters, been abducted, as well as she hasn't been, but some of her clients have been abducted. And in her work, she helps them come to terms with and deal with those types of experiences. And then, of course, and Lesley is going to be my guest sitting in the expert's chair. And of course, there's going to be a WWRS as well, just before the expert's chair. But before we get there, I've got a couple of requests. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Incidentally, subscriptions are complimentary. That means they're free. You just click on it and say hello, and then you can keep in touch with us and know when all the shows that we're going to be releasing. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and pretty much anywhere else that you find your podcasts. If you would like to get in touch with me, Lindsy Milne, because I am a psychic, and I still am doing readings, you can find me on my website, www.robertlindsymilne.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok as well. And now, without further ado, let's light this candle and get the show started. I want to talk today on WWRS about self-esteem and how self-esteem, our self-esteem and other people's self-esteem affect us in every day of our life. It's interesting. Most people that have been in a relationship for a lengthy time, whether that be a marriage, whether that be a romantic connection, whether that be a friendship, and sometimes even people connecting in a work environment. Most people that are connected together have pretty much the same level of self-esteem, because it's difficult for someone with high self-esteem to get along with or just be around someone with low self-esteem. And the reverse is true. Someone with low self-esteem is uncomfortable around someone with high self-esteem. So regardless of how a couple would behave, and we've all seen relationships where there is one person, it can be the man, and it can be the woman. One person is far more dominant, controlling than their partner. And the partner tends to be submissive and have a low standard of esteem. Actually, they're pretty much even, because it's just so difficult to have a relationship where the esteem is where there's a difference in that self-esteem. When one partner in that relationship, regardless of whether it's the dominant or submissive one, when one partner goes through some time of growth, expansion, the relationship is now in danger, is threatened to end. Because when someone grows, they become different. And the person with low self-esteem, or the person that's choosing not to grow or staying the same, will do their best to pull the other one back down. to that level. And it can be hostile, it can be negative, it can be quite intense. The person with high self-esteem is then stuck that they either have to keep on growing or slide back to the level they left from. Sometimes it ends a long-term relationship. A lot of times it can end a friendship when one grows and one chooses to stay the same. Take a look at your self-esteem and never mind about the external behavior. Just look at your self-esteem and how you deal with others and how you allow and tolerate how people deal with you. You'll find that your self-esteem is very much a personal one, but pretty much equal to anyone you'd be spending a lot of time with. And that's what Robert has to say. My guest tonight in the experts chair is Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, currently in Toronto, Canada, originally from New York, is a practicing hypnotherapist, grand master of her craft. Generally, her practice is with the traditional hypnotic type therapy. Her specialty happens to be dealing with people who have had alien encounters, abductions, and also family members that have been abducted. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke also does therapy with people who or does therapy with people that have traumatic experiences. And furthermore, she has learned and studied a huge amount about extraterrestrials. They're here, the different types, and I just can't wait to hear all the things that she has to say. So let's get this interview going. My guest, Lesley Mitchell-Clarke, in and sitting in the experts chair tonight. Lesley, I'm just wondering, how does a young girl from New York City have this extensive background in music, jazz, acting, and performing to becoming a hypnotherapist specializing in people that have had alien experiences? And how did that happen?
Well, I should put it out there that a lot of these things I never stopped doing. I still sing regularly. In fact, 2 nights ago, I was the featured performer at the TD Niagara Jazz Festival.
Okay.
I still do acting work, voiceovers. Yeah, not live theater really anymore. I'm not an equity member, but I still do acting and performing work. But there has always had to be or at least since I stopped traveling on the road so much, since my kids came along, there has to be a income stream that is dependable and such. And for a number of years, I did work still in the music business as a top media consultant, publicist, and the jazz world in New York City. I handled all of Warner Brothers Records and more. So I did that until I had a kind of an epiphany. It was a midlife epiphany as opposed to a crisis. In other words, I didn't buy a red convertible and get a girlfriend, but I did have a kind of an epiphany.
Sure.
And I just realized that, wow, as a publicist, all I'm doing here, I'm using all my skills about people. I'm manipulating people. Sometimes I'm lying. And I said, and even then, what I'm really doing that is criminal is I am blowing people's egos up for 2 months and then I'm done. And they inevitably have like a postpartum, depression, because they get all this attention. I've got them interviewing here and doing this and doing that, and then nothing. right? So
Right.
I thought, I'm using a lot of skills in the wrong way, but I don't know what to do. So my husband, God bless him, this was really an inspired thing. He decided he was going to buy me a past life regression for the purpose of kind of finding my path. So he found a noted hypnotherapist, and I went and I
What
had
country was that?
that was right here. That was
Okay.
here. That was here. I was here. That was Toronto, and found a lovely lady. And I went to her and I had a very successful, fascinating regression. But the main thing that I took away from that was I can do this. I can do this work.
How did you
I,
know
be-
that?
I knew it in my soul. And I also knew, because of course I do believe in past lives, that I had done this work before, that it
Okay.
was in my mind computer.
Yeah.
It was just a natural thing. And so once I had that epiphany, it didn't take me long to find, the right teacher. And I went to the Ontario Ontario
Yeah.
Hypnosis School and Center, which was run by Dr. Georgina Cannon, who, not related to Dolores Cannon, but you may know her from her relationship with Shirley MacLaine, and a lot of big celebs were always coming in to see her. But at any rate, I also later I took on my metaphysical certifications. Also, I do a lot of pediatric hypnosis. I work in addiction. I work in pain management. So all of those things were kind of further studies that went beyond the basic course. But the basic course does allow you to do all of these modalities. Maybe it shouldn't, but it does. But I took the proper training and certification through our guild, and so at in these contemporary times, I I do not only what you would call mainstream hypnosis, which would involve all these things I mentioned earlier, weight loss, quitting a
Right.
habit, blah blah, and I also work in metaphysical hypnosis and regression. And my particular bent, my particular specialty is I work with many, many individuals who believe that they have had extraterrestrial encounter experiences
Did
of
you believe in
some
them?
variety.
Did you believe in those encounters? Did you believe them back then, or have you developed your belief in them since you started your hypnotherapy?
Well, in truth, and I discuss this a lot in my recent book, Intersections, in truth, I had a series of amazing UFO type experiences one summer when I was working in a summer stock theater in the Black Hills of South Dakota. So I was already open to all that. And, Eric Von Daniken had already made his little Super 8 film.
What were you discovering back then with those alien experiences? What did you? Because I
Well,
haven't experienced any of that.
okay. Well, I'll just tell. I'll do
Yeah.
a Cliff's Notes version of
Okay.
what happened to me. So I arrived fresh out of high school. I was 16 years old, and I was accepted to this prestigious Midwestern summer stock theater
Yeah.
called the Black Hills Playhouse. And I suppose we had about 300 people in the company, and it was in repertory. We did 5, 6, 7 shows. It was very busy. So one of the gals that was in the company, and at the time I thought that she was very senior to me, maybe she was in her late 20s, right? But I was so
Mm,
young.
yeah.
So she had had already a very professional career as a singer, mostly of country music in Las Vegas. And she also raised wild horses or tamed them or whatever she did. So um, she had a car, which was great.
Yeah.
So we would drive into town, which was Custer, South Dakota, through the dark, winding Black Hills. And I think it was the first time I rode with her that I had the first sighting. And it was a fully realized craft that I saw, which was very much in the mode of the saucer, the Betty and Barney Hill type of I could distinguish windows, I thought, but there were multiple colors and it was silent. And it was flying, or if you could call it flying, it was bobbing and weaving kind of through the trees. And I asked her to stop the car. I said, look at that, can you see that? And she says, well, they're just, they're just pressuring me. I said, what do you mean pressuring you? And she revealed that she was a very excellent psychic, and she actually worked in the secret government program in what we call Dreamland, or I think Area 51. And she would go to a plane wrap airport and get into a plane wrap plane, and they would fly her out there, and she would work with other sensitives in mastering telepathic communication with ETs. And she said she had become completely exhausted from it because the communication never stopped. She couldn't say, I'm done, no more. It was constant. And she was being pressured probably by the ETs and the government. So I found this, of course, incredibly startling, but there I was seeing the evidence. What could I say to that? So this went on really all summer. There would be sightings, intermit, some of them closer, some of them farther away. And one afternoon, I was lounging at the snack bar, something I was really good at. And I was lounging at the snack bar, and across the way, maybe about 20 feet away, was this gal's dorm area. It was kind of like a campground. There were outside buildings, but they were, decent structures. So I saw this highly unusual car pull in. I mean, it looked like a Pontiac Star Chief. I don't think it had fins, but it was just about there. We're talking late 50s, early 60s, and it was black, like your classic MIB, except I didn't know about that then, but your classic MIB car. So it's
What is MIB?
Oh, Men in Black, your government, like the movie, like the movies, classic. So this car pulls in and it goes around the, turnaround and stops right in front of her door. And then I see these, and I'm going to use the term beings because I didn't believe at the time, and I still do not believe that they were human or fully human. So these beings come out, and they're physically not very large, but they're wearing 1940s shoulder pad. I mean, they're wearing George Raft suits. They really are. And they also have on, fedoras. And it's like, it's like 30 Celsius. It's bloody hot. It's the middle of the summer. And I also noticed that their pants were really high, and they were wearing like big, looked like orthopedic shoes. And I now wonder, somebody pointed out and said, do you think that it had to do with how they perceive gravity? Do you think the shoes were weighted? Because they were walking, really not very comfortably. So that's a possibility. Anyway, they go into her, quarters, and I'm sort of paralyzed. And the other strange thing is I'm looking all around, and this is a company of 300 people and a cook and not one person is around. I see no one walking anywhere. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it 10 minutes. And then I'm going in. Now, what did I expect to do? Wave a tuna sandwich at them? I don't know what my plan was, but that's being a teenager and having no frontal lobe. So I was ready to go in. And just as I was about to step in, these beings came out. They didn't run. They were moving kind of robotically. They got back in the car and they sped out and sped away.
When they saw you?
They didn't appear to see me.
Oh.
They didn't acknowledge me at all, either when they came in or when they came out. It was just like, okay, this person is here. I mean, anybody in the know would know that I had been with her and we had been having sightings all summer. I'd already seen craft, 20 times or something. So I don't think I was a threat in some way. I think I was allowed to be there simply because I was not going to cause any trouble.
Okay.
They don't
Okay.
want people to cause trouble. They'll knock
Yeah.
them out. They'll put the memory blocks on. They'll put the hoodoo on them. They don't want them to overreact.
Okay.
So anyway, then I ran in there and I said, "What the hell was that?" And she just said, "Well, that was just they were coming again to try to talk me into coming back into the program." And again, I refused. So I don't know what happened to
That's
this young
so
lady
random.
after that.
Oh,
I
okay.
tried to find her a few times and was not successful. But you know, and I often thought, wow, did she make herself disappear? Did she disappear? But so that had already happened before I ever had my life-changing past life
Did you think
regression.
about that very much afterwards?
I thought about it all the time. I thought about it all the time. I really, really did. And but not in a fearful way.
Just processing because it's
Yeah,
unusual.
yeah, just wanting to know more, always wanting to know more,
Sure.
always looking for the next interesting
Right.
documentary, always wanting to know more, and believing by and large these dear souls that, you know, they give up everything to tell the truth, and are
Oh, the
often
people that have
the
been
people that are experiencers
in,
who have
right.
legitimate experiences. I mean, let's talk about Travis Walton, for instance. That poor man lost everything.
Who's
His
Travis?
marriage.
You're
Travis Walton
yes.
is a very, very famous experiencer. In fact, an amazing movie, which they're now remaking,
Right.
was made about his experience, and it's called Fire in the Sky. And Travis Walton was a young forestry worker and in Arizona, near Snowflake,
Mhm.
Arizona, and he and I think it was four of his compatriots were up working in those mountains doing their work. And when they finished for the day, they were leaving the area, at which time they spotted again, a very classic UFO looking very much like what I described, you know,
Right.
the real Betty and Barney Hill model. So except this craft was had a big energy beam coming out of the bottom of it. So all the guys are really scared, but Travis, for some reason, wasn't scared and jumped out of the truck and ran into the beam, at which point he was lifted up and then dropped. And we're talking, maybe this was 20 feet, 30 feet, substantial drop. So the guys in the truck were terrified and they thought he was dead, and they panicked and they sped away. And after a few moments, they were guilty. They sped back and Travis's body was gone, no trace of him. Now, I think it was, forgive me, your
Yeah.
listeners are very astute. Forgive me if I have any of these little details incorrect, but I believe it was at least 5 days that he was gone. And the ETs dropped him off on a piece of barren highway in a little town close to where he lived, and somehow he was able to call his brother on the phone, who came. His brother and his girlfriend, I believe, came and picked him up.
Had this
A-
happened to Travis before this time, or was it as his first experience?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because he has always just talked about this as if it was an isolated, wrong place, wrong time type of incident. But
Yeah.
he did, I did see him speak at a more intimate setting than a convention, and he did say that he now believes that he has had previous experiences.
Okay.
But I don't believe that he has been to a hypnotherapist. I offered my services, so if he ever does, I hope he'll come to me. So so here's this dear man who came out publicly. Well, what finally happened, and this is the crux of the injustice of the whole thing, while he was gone for
Yeah.
the 5 days, his brother-in-law and his friends were all being investigated for murder. and they
Because he
were,
disappeared.
yes, and they were grilling these guys and giving them lie detector tests, and they got some big FBI guy from Texas to come in, and nobody would believe them, even though they all tested as if they were truthful. No one believed them that a beam of light came down and sucked him up and dropped him down. So he
So that, yeah, it sucked him up and then dropped him down, but that they sucked him up and he was gone for 5 days, then dropped him.
No, well,
Oh,
they
I
dropped
got,
him off. I said
oh,
the actual incident, he was
okay.
physically picked up by that
Yeah.
beam, and his compatriots saw him be dropped on the
Okay.
ground.
Okay.
They split, so they didn't know what happened. Now, as
Okay.
Travis says, he was taken back aboard the craft, and now he believes that it was completely accidental, that he was hurt, and that the ETs actually saved his life and healed him and regenerated him. And that
Okay.
although he only remembered parts and it was terrifying,
Right.
he now has come to this
Okay.
probably much more likely point of view. Now, also, this was a craft that was being operated by both grays, a variety of grays, and humanoids, people who look just like us. In fact, he tried to speak English to them, but I think they're telepathic. I'm not sure
Right.
they understand
Okay.
English. So what's portrayed in the movie
Yeah.
is a terrifying piece of fiction. They hired a separate director, an Italian director, cinematographer, to come in and shoot the aboard craft sequence, which bears no relation to anything that Travis experienced or wrote in his book. So there you go. So
That's a fascinating story. It really truly is, and we could talk about that all day. But so that was back in the 70s.
that experience happened, boy, I'm going to guess 1972,
Okay.
early
All right.
70s is my guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we're in 2022.
Hmm.
So how did you come from being in music and entertainment and things like that to being a therapist and somebody working with people that have had encounters or believe they've had encounters
Hmm.
with aliens? How did that
Well,
happen?
I think it was a direction that I always wanted to go in, and I was already
After that time in
uh,
72?
oh yes,
Okay.
substantially after the in 1972, I was shaking my booty on the road. I
Yeah.
was not, so let's see, I've been working in as a certified
Yep.
hypnotherapist for probably about 20 years now.
Okay.
So that's about how long ago we were talking when I began training.
Okay.
Now, I was working in the beginning of my hypnotherapy career at the Ontario Hypnosis Center, which is a very highly regarded place in Yorkville. Now, about once a month, someone would call in and would say, I have an unusual thing. I believe I may have had a ET encounter. I have missing time. I have a scar in my body. Whatever it was. And so none of my colleagues wanted to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Because that person would be crazy.
Yeah. And so I said, bring it on. So it was just,
That's great.
I did.
I love you.
I said, bring it on. And so what started to happen, Robert, is I just think quite simply the law of attraction.
Right.
When
Okay.
I became able to help these people, and there is no real established methodology for working with experiencers, but what I have done is I have adapted past life regression techniques developed by Dr. Georgina Cannon to work in the areas with experiencers. I didn't reinvent the wheel, but I have adapted what I already knew and was facile with. So every time someone came in with that type of issue, I took them on. And I have to tell you, the experiencer phenomena, it crosses all socioeconomic, racial, religious, differences that we ethnicities, it is a global phenomena and has been going on since before our recorded history, because I believe that we are the hybrids. So, all of the fear-based behaviors that people are expressing about the ET presence, and, God forbid, the right wing wanting to militarize space and being fearful of invasions. If these evolved beings, even if they're not culturally more evolved than we are, they certainly have superior technology. And if they wanted to wipe us out, they could. The repeated message that I hear from every experiencer I have ever worked with is, you must put on your big boy pants. You must clean up your environment. You must heal Mother Earth. You must be kind to each other. You must demilitarize. You must, cure the sick. And we have technology that can help with all of that. All you
Why
have to
do they
do,
care?
because I think that they feel
Yeah.
a genetic responsibility.
Because they created the hybrids?
Well, I don't know if created
Oh.
would maybe be the word. That's certainly, it's certainly, if you are, and I am a follower of Zecharia Sitchin, and of course Sitchin's work is all about the Anunnaki, and we're talking about ancient Sumeria. Ground zero
Right.
for
Okay.
civilization was most probably created by the Anunnaki, and they were advanced geneticists. And so we have genetic relations with, I believe, a number of star beings that bear a huge physical resemblance to us. From what I've been told, and again, I'm not making, this is just what I've heard, so I'm
Right.
offering
Okay.
it, take it as you will. Pleiadians, Arcturians, Lyrans, all these people look so much like us that they could walk amongst us, and I believe that they do. They have earth-like environments, but it seems that at least a portion of the beings who visit here, who resemble us, are vibrating at a higher resonancy. So they are actually interdimensional, if you want to think about it
Okay.
in those terms. Everything is vibration, everything. And when we increase or lower our vibration, it's like a radio dial. So we're in the third density, we're in the meat suit. We are still grappling with feudalism and tribal
Sure.
warfare. Really, we're still grappling with all this stuff. And so I think that we are on the crest of being accepted into, and this may sound nutty, but I hear
No,
about a
it's
lot.
good.
I
Good.
believe that there is a galactic, a benevolent galactic federation, not unlike Gene Roddenberry's
Roddenberry's the
vision. In
okay.
fact, he was a very highly ranked
Oh,
military officer, and also was involved with the CIA and such. Who knows what he actually knew?
in those programs, Star Trek, a lot of the technology that we saw in those early shows in the 60s and are what we're using now.
Yes, I
Is
mean, biobeds, measuring EMF fields, measuring, using a thing like a tricorder to identify different emanations.
yes.
There's a whole lot of robotic surgery. There's a whole lot of stuff. In fact, I think there was a TV show. It was great. It was called How Star Trek Changed the World.
Yes, I
But
saw
I do have to wonder what Roddenberry knew. But that being said, everything that I hear leads me to understand that there is a benevolent galactic federation. Now,
I was talking with someone that's written several books about UFOs and he mentioned that there's a group of aliens that are praying mantises. Have you heard
yeah,
of that? Oh, you've
all the time, all the
really?
time.
Are they
They
big,
are
little? What are
They
they?
are big, they are tall. It would be
Yeah.
very disturbing
Do you
for
think?
us to see them
Yeah.
maybe. But the thing is, the mantis beings are like pure love. They
Huh.
often, and they have been described, when I've got people regress to their childhood experiences, and by the way, I don't believe there is any such thing as someone who's had only one experience. But anyway, when I regress people, they to their childhood experiences, they will often talk about the brown doctors. Now, they don't want to be seen. They are the expert geneticists of the universe, and they often wear monk-like a monk-like cowl, so they won't disturb people, but as beings, they are pure love and highly evolved.
Wow.
We have a lot of prejudice about the
Other
fact
being,
that we come
other
from
life
a
forms.
mammalian
Right.
stream, but on some planets the insectoid stream is the one. Now we still have shared DNA. We have shared DNA with
Sure.
reptilians.
Sure.
We have
And
reptilian DNA.
and are there like reptiles that are like aliens as well?
Mhm. Absolutely, and many kinds, and most of
Do they
them,
eat us?
no, most of them completely benevolent. These fearful things. Now, what I'm going to say about this, and
Yeah.
it's I have not only a friend, but someone I've presented with at conferences, Captain Randy Kramer. Now, Captain Kramer was a participant in what we call the secret space program, which is an entity that has been around since the 50s. That's when the military industrial complex got mixed up with exotic technology, shall we say. Anyway, Captain Kramer has told me an awful lot. He and some of the other individuals who have experienced this have spoken openly about working in the Mars Defense Force and the Lunar Defense Force. Now, on Mars, apparently, and this again is not just from Captain Kramer, but many experiencers, Mars apparently does have an atmosphere because it's been terraformed since the 50s. And it's possible when you go there to walk about. Now, it's a little bit like making an adjustment, like being at a high altitude. So
Okay.
some people take oxygen, but it has an atmosphere. It was also at one time populated by an extremely ancient civilization, where what's left of their architecture looks to be Egyptian, made in the same kind of way. So that exists. And then also there are several groups apparently of reptilian beings that live underground on
Okay.
Mars. And we have treaties actually with like two of them, but there's like one of them that still likes to come out and fight. So we do have a defensive situation there. Now, Randy Kramer, Captain Kramer, all
When they come out to fight, who do they fight with?
they're fighting our soldiers who are stationed in the Mars Defense Force.
We have soldiers on Mars.
Absolutely, we do, and we have since the 50s.
So when
And
we say ours, is this the world's, or is this the United States? Is this Russia? Is this?
well,
I
Captain
know it's
Kramer,
not Canada.
well,
Maybe?
Canada and the US have been in bed together on the whole UFO thing since the beginning. So yes, absolutely, there are
Really?
Canadians involved, lots of Canadians.
Even right now, today?
To this moment. So what what uh, what I've had
Yeah.
explained to me
Yes.
is that when I say our, I'm speaking of our blue earth, our watery
Okay.
planet. Now, Randy
right.
Kramer said that there is barely a country on the face of the earth that is not represented in in the space, in the Black Ops secret space
Really?
program. Yeah. So this is
How did you find that out?
well, this is kind of this is
Like,
amongst people who are
Okay.
kind of interested in this
All right.
particular aspect. There is a lot of information out
Okay.
there. Now, a book that I would suggest
Please.
that any of your wonderful listeners, if you're interested in this particular time, which I would call the advent of the of the secret space program, there's a book called The Day After Roswell.
The day
by
after
the
Roswell.
day after Roswell by Colonel Philip Corso. And he was there after the Roswell crash. He witnessed the beginning. He was involved with the beginning of the secret space program. He knows about the deal that we made with those Greys that crashed at Roswell. There was an exchange of technology, but there was also a suppression of truth.
Of that information. Why?
Yeah. Well, apparently it was the final decision of Harry Truman. And that's why
Give
this is
him hell, Harry.
yeah, that's why this is sometimes called the Truman Agreement. But Harry Truman and the Joint Chiefs of Staff felt that our global population was not ready for the knowledge that we are not alone and the knowledge that we don't have superior technology in this universe. They just thought it was too much, and that the religious people would freak out and the economy would collapse.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
so that original what we call the Truman Agreement that was made with the Zeta Reticulite Greys, they were having a lot of genetic problems. They were not able to
the Greys.
the Greys, this particular group of Greys that was involved in the Roswell crash had survivors, and that was how we really made contact. But they had been visiting our planet because we are distantly related. They have some human DNA and they could no longer reproduce. So they said, well, we're going to give you, how about this? You know, we're not interested in any kind of war, anything like that. We will give you technology that you can handle. And in exchange, we would like to harvest genetic material from a few of your people on this earth.
Is that why there were abductions?
Yeah. And the brutal ones, by the Greys, where they're taking sperm and they're taking ovum, and then later people are showed their hybrid children and they are part Grey and part human. And
did that freak people out? I bet
it freaked people out. It did so much damage, and it was completely over the top from what we were told.
So the Greys aren't necessarily our enemies. They're just not particularly sensitive to.
Yes, but there again, we must remember there are many, many, many different types of Greys.
Okay.
And most of them are completely benevolent.
In order
But
for
these
me to
guys
remember
from
that, I have to know it.
It's really, but these guys from Zeta Reticuli,
Is that a planet, a solar system?
It's a binary planet with there's Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2. And they have been involved in trade with all of the civilizations for millennia. They're old hands at space travel, and they're neither good nor bad, except that they were quite inept and often brutal in what they did, but they believed they had permission to do it. Now, also, I should say that there was an end to this agreement that they ratified, that everybody ratified. It carried on into the Eisenhower years. But I believe, and I can pretty much put a finger on this because it's when I stopped hearing about, or people stopped coming to me with these brutal kind of genetic material inductions. So I'm going to say that it probably ended sometime in the early 80s. So when someone does come to me with repressed memories of one of these horrible events, it's never taken place last night. It's always 20 years ago, 25 years ago, like that. So that horrible kind of thing, we're not really seeing that at this point. And so the day after Roswell explains how this came about, and the technology that we received certainly explains the big leap that we had. We got integrated circuits, we got fiber optics, we got Velcro. Great for costume designers. We got let's see, and more stuff about, we got invisibility, and I'm not invisibility, cloaking and other kinds of things. So and then
so they've shared technology
absolutely
in exchange for our DNA
Mhm.
or other things that we have.
Yeah, our DNA to reboot their
Yeah. Okay. I can.
inability to reproduce for whatever
Sure.
reason that happened, and then it came to an end. So
Have the
that's,
Greys become more sensitive since they've had some of our DNA, or are they still as harsh
well, I
or
think
brutal
I don't think that they are. I don't think that they are.
compared to us, but not them, right?
Well, I think what I would say is I think their experiments were probably quite successful. And I think that they did stimulate their reproduction.
Okay.
And I think that there are a number of gray and human hybrids that are probably able to live on Earth. And the differences are so subtle that you wouldn't even notice it. So we're even more connected with them genetically than we were before. But
Do
I
they
don't
like to make contact with people?
they will often stay in touch with the people who have, helped them. Or see, they look at it in a different way, I guess, but they stay in touch with the people who have helped them, or the individuals that they believe
Contributed.
that are
Okay.
hybrids,
Okay.
that are part of them. And as I said, sometimes even today, one of the experiencers that I work with, who's a lifelong experiencer, not that long ago, he had a very physical experience where he went on a craft and he was shown his
Oh, I'd love
children.
that.
He was
Oh,
shown his children, and when they took them away, he just sobbed like a
really?
baby, because in this life he's a person who does not have children for various reasons, and he could see him, and he immediately accepted that they were his children and just didn't even care about anything else and didn't want to let them go. So, but not all of the hybrids, apparently, as I understand, are able to live on Earth. That didn't necessarily work for all of them, but they are able now to use our DNA in whatever way they are to reproduce. So that whole thing is over.
So they kind of live amongst us
Mhm.
and we don't know,
It's entirely possible. I believe so.
and they
I
just interact like
hmm
people.
hmm
Okay.
Except they're highly telepathic. Telepathy is the
Yeah.
language of the universe.
We are
Telepathy,
talking to a psychic, right? So,
yeah,
right,
absolutely. You
right.
know that.
Yeah.
So telepathy and numbers and math
Oh,
are, or physics, if you will, those are the intergalactic languages. So,
I think I've recently had an experience, but I don't want to talk about that right now. But I
well,
think
I
I've
have
really
no
had.
doubt, because Robert, what the ETs are interested in my belief, after doing this for 20 years, what they are interested in is working with individuals who have psychic ability. And they sometimes are following genetic lines, they which they
Really out
can
of luck in
do.
my bloodlines. No one in my bloodlines admits that they have this awareness.
Well, that's often the case where it skips generations.
Yeah.
That's it's genetics. It's the roll of the dice, right? and
Right.
and for a man to be, and this is not meant
No,
in any
no.
demeaning way, it's just that there seems to be a greater proportion of female psychics than male. Now, I am not sure if it has to do simply with societal acceptance of a man who is psychic. It may be completely equal. I don't know, but in my figures and in my books, I work with, it seems, many more women than men. But it may be a,
Well, that you do like in hypnotherapy
mhm.
or okay, and those you work with more women than men, and you're seeing that they're psychics or intuitives, and okay, I just want to
Because
get
I'm
that.
always asking, when they're going through their recounting their experiences to me, I'm always saying, are they speaking to you in your mind, or are their mouths moving? Are they using their glottis and
Oh,
esophageal stuff? And let's say, no, they're all just talking you're all just talking in my mind. And so they need that. It's so hard the other way for them to work with a bunch of different beings. See, there are a lot of
Okay, okay,
collaborative programs
sure,
going on.
okay.
And think about it for a minute, Robert. If you were, Jane Goodall, and
Yep.
you're in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and you discover an unknown tribe of advanced primates, but only maybe 5 of them are able to form words and speak, wouldn't you spend your time with the ones that could physically communicate and
Right.
say words? I
Okay.
think it's a little bit like that. And also, many of us, and I suspect yourself, Robert, we are we are here at this time in this place because this is the grand experiment, and we want to be here to bring a new era into being. In fact, I think we are, midwives of disclosure is the term I use, and that's the book after the next one. So
How many books have you written?
I've just read, well, I've been a
But
journalist for years and written
okay.
lots of stuff, but I just
Wow.
have one out now that is about ufology, but the
Yeah.
next one is almost finished. And then Midwives of Disclosure, I'm going to write in collaboration again with Wes Roberts, who is an experiencer who I had the great privilege of working with over a number of years.
You're saying, I think you said you have more women clients than male clients around this area, or do you have more female clients than male clients as a hypnotherapist, ordinary, everyday kind of hypnotherapist? Like, I couldn't imagine anything that's ordinary or middle of the road about you. So,
well, it's
maybe your clients, but
well, I think probably in my mainstream straight ahead work, it's right down the middle.
okay. Okay.
I think, and essentially, I think men and women are the same. Their souls are not male or female. We're just souls, and we come into these different bodies, and we're subjected to these hormonal things that go on. But in the realm of metaphysical hypnosis, and that includes past life regressions, there is a definite predominance of female experiencers in my practice. Now, maybe another practitioner would say something different, but
mine is maybe 65-35. 65% female, 60% or 40 male, something like that. There is more. I've had more women clients over my lifetime than male clients.
Yes,
I'm getting more men, but
the men are coming in, but in mainstream hypnosis, a lot of the problems that men are having are coping with changes in our society, and men not knowing what to do or how to feel, or it's or having lived with their parents too long, or scared won't be able to buy a house. There are a lot men are coming in with a lot of gender issue concerns, not their identity necessarily, but how do I function in society now?
There's
and
been
show,
a huge transition in our lives. Well, I'm a bit older than you, but in our lives, the difference in the way my parents were when I was growing up and the way mothers and fathers are today.
Oh my.
Women's position in the world is far more powerful than it has been, and certainly in our recorded history.
Oh, absolutely true.
Which I agree with, and
yes,
right. I'm on that side.
I am too, and I kind of think almost women a lot of the time have always run the show, but from a manipulative point of view, which is no fun. But I was born in 1956. I mean, it was Leave It to Beaver. It was extremely traditional. I mean, yes, my dad was a jazz musician, but it was it was a little bit like the Dick Van Dyke Show. He'd come home from, and my mom would be wearing one of those dresses with
Yep.
this, with the petticoat and,
Yeah.
and there you go. So everything has changed dramatically from
And
that.
in that area,
Dramatically.
in that case, or in that situation, profoundly for the positive. By the way, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And it's only going until, Robert, I feel that until we balance the male and female energies on this planet, we are going to continue to have unrest. Women have been suppressed for so long, and they're still so suppressed in certain
And one of
countries.
the things that happens for men or doesn't happen for men is being taught how to live differently, how what the traditional ways of doing things are changed, but
Yeah.
we haven't had the opportunity to be taught or shown how things should be or need to be.
Yeah. And what replaces it? I mean,
What replaces
I'm
it?
embarrassed to tell you a few times, I thought a man was going to open the door for me and he didn't. And I just sort of plowed into the door, but
Sure.
I'm old school and now I'm an old fart. So you should
Yeah.
open the door for an old lady
Right.
anyway,
Well, I
no matter.
always open the door first for people. Right? I've always done that. So yeah.
If you see me hobbling along
Yep.
over there in Corso Italia, be sure to open the door and then buy me a nice giant glass of Chianti,
Right.
and it'll be okay.
Yeah. So, all right, that's really fascinating. So when people have experiences with UFOs, are they always traumatized?
No.
Okay.
No,
I guess
not
you
at
wouldn't
all.
see the ones that aren't traumatized though, right?
I see a mashup, but what usually happens is trauma or perceived trauma can be just not remembering things correctly, especially in our little childhood perception. So it's not unusual for me to regress, take the little shreds of the memory, the conscious memories they have, and go back to the childhood experience. And then I say, now you can see in the dark, you can see what the beings look like. And I help them to completely, without fear, with the lights on, look at what's going on. And they can see that the beings express that they don't want to hurt them or whatever. It's so often what was perceived or thought to be a terrifying experience turns out to be a benign experience. And what we need to address with lifelong experiencers is how they balance this contact within the framework of having a productive life in the third density and getting the rest that they need. Because many experiencers, if not all of them, have big time sleep disorders. And I think it's in part due to the fact that some aspect of them may be afraid to fall asleep because so many occurrences have happened at night, but also from the mature experiencers that I work with, what I'm hearing is that at nighttime, they bilocate, astral project, if you will, and are
I'm sorry,
actually the experiencer, the
Okay.
experiencer themselves, the mature experiencer themselves, like I'm going to say an experiencer past 40, this is a common experience where they have apparently in their etheric life, they have they're working on some kind of project or with other beings of a wide variety. And rather than going through the more cumbersome or difficult process of being transported out of our dimension and into someplace else, mature experiencers seem to have the ability to effortlessly bilocate. And I think maybe they've been taught that.
So I've never, you've used words I've never quite heard of before or never heard of. Bilocate. What is bilocate? Well, two locations, but
two at one time. So
okay.
two places at once. So what that would mean, what I mean by using that particular term, is the experiencer's physical body doesn't go anywhere. It's lying there
Okay.
in the bed in a deep sleep and probably couldn't be woken up if the partner or whatever
Right.
tried. So they look to be in a very, very deep sleep, but the physical body's there, but the consciousness, much in the same way people do with remote viewing or with astral projection. But this is a projection that when the individual arrives, like in spirit, I guess, if you will, in their etheric body on the craft, it seems very physical to them, and they are
Them
perceived
being
and
the human.
yeah, to
Oh.
the human
Okay.
experiencer, and also to the beings that are perceiving them. Oh, hi, how are you? You know, and so this etheric body that we have, which is part of us, the astral body, whatever you wish to call it, can adjust its vibration, I believe, and function independently, and in fact engage with beings who are either in another dimension or in some distant galaxy. It doesn't matter where they are, because it's the speed of thought.
Right.
We can
Okay.
travel at the speed of thought.
Yes.
So the kinds of things that happen early in an experiencer's life, like being taken aboard craft and taught and learned how to do all these little things with your mind and being in classes. This is what the experiencers go through when they're children. And so it shifts in later life into a completely etheric experience, if you will. An encounter experience, Robert, can be physical
Yes.
or it can be spiritual.
Does everybody
it's
get them, or just a few people?
I think that being taught this technique is a big part of what happens when the young people that are going aboard craft and being trained are trained to do. I've heard descriptions of a kind of a chair, or kind of like a video game thing that helps you to learn to do it,
Oh, I'd
to
love to do
actually
that.
project, actually allow that part
Is
of
there a
yourself
place
to
to
the
sign?
consciousness.
Is there a place that I can sign up or
Well,
join, or like?
lots of people sign up now. I mean, and how do you know you haven't signed up already and that you don't do this at night? Does it ever happen that you wake up completely exhausted as if you haven't slept?
Mhm.
Well, that could be an indicator that something else is going on at night.
I'd really like to know if it is. I'd really like to consciously know.
You have to come over, man, and have a session.
Okay, well, we can do that.
We'll work on that, because
Wow.
you're exactly the kind you're exactly the kind of person that, I think would be of interest
Hmm.
to ETs that want to communicate, and also your psychic ability. I think
You're
it's
saying things in conversation that, while if I wouldn't be thinking about aliens or ETs, I wouldn't have noticed. But you're saying things, and I'm thinking, oh, I've experienced that. I
mhm.
do this. This happens to me. And until recently, I never would have been receptive or
Mhm.
aware.
Well, this is the time when people wake up about that part of their life. It's this is this is very common. Most people, Robert, do come to me 40 plus, more
Mhm.
commonly older than that.
Okay. Okay.
But this is when, I guess this is when we are ready to understand what has been going on. We're ready to integrate it, and we're ready to consciously, help the world one person at a time. I tell you, if we ever needed help, we need it now.
Here, one of the things that I say is that I really don't understand politics. I don't understand finance. I'm not interested in the big picture. I am interested in helping the person in front of me.
Yes. And actually that's how I think.
Me too.
As a practitioner, I think I am helping one person
Yeah.
at a time. So their healing, their benefit, that is what is of primary concern to me. And of course, in Canada, and rightly so, as a hypnotherapist, I am not allowed legally to work with individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental health issue. And by that, I mean something profound like
Schizophrenia.
bipolar issue or
Sure.
schizophrenia, any kind of dissociative disorder, borderline personality disorder. If there anything
Yeah.
has been diagnosed, once it's diagnosed,
Then
I
you
can't
can't
do it.
touch
But
them. Yeah.
sometimes people come to me before they've ever been diagnosed, or they've been diagnosed and they're hiding it from me.
Right.
So I have to and also I want to say, if anyone has struggled with mental illness, one thing does not preclude the other. You can be suffering a mental issue and be an experiencer. It's
Sure.
just that unfortunately, I'm not the person that would be able to
Right.
legally sort that out.
Sure.
So when someone comes my way that seems to display enough symptomatic evidence, or the meds that they're taking, and I know what they're for. That's another thing. I used to be a psychiatric technician, so I know a lot about medicine. So anyway, there you go. So if I have the slightest doubt that is the case, here in Toronto, I have a number of colleagues who are psychologists and psychiatrists and psychotherapists who are allowed to go into those areas, and they are open to the idea of ET contact. So so I send someone on. I don't leave them hanging out to dry. I would never do anything like that. And just because they are experiencing schizophrenic symptoms, it doesn't mean that something else isn't going on. So
Do you
that's what I
do
do
work?
about that.
Do you do work online, or
I
is it
do.
strictly in? Oh yeah. So
I absolutely do.
okay. So after all the things that you've said, or the astonishing, and we barely scratched the surface, how do people find you if they need your service, want your service, or just want to learn from you?
Oh, just a
How
question.
do
If
they
you
do
just
that?
have a question, I love for people to get in touch with me, even if you just have a question or an
Okay.
observation or whatever it is. So you can always reach me at Lesley, Lesley,
Yeah.
at lightworkhypnosis.com. And that's all one word, lightworkhypnosis.com. I am also on Facebook as both Lightwork Hypnosis and Lesley Mitchell-Clarke. So you can always send me a Facebook message too. And I promise to get back to you. It may take me a minute, but I always do. So I'd love to hear from anyone out there who has a question or whatever.
Early on in I can't remember if it was just before we started, just after we started, we said, oh, well, you suggested we could do another show on jazz musicians. While I love jazz and jazz musicians, maybe we can do two shows, one on another one, like what we've been an extension of today, and then talk about jazz and
we'll put jazz
Chris.
on, we'll put showbiz on the back burner,
Can
because
we do
that book
Okay.
isn't even finished yet. So we'll put
Okay.
that on the back burner. That'll be another thing. But I would love to come and talk some more about,
Wow.
I don't know, the secret space program and the kinds of encounters people have had and the many diverse beings that they have experienced, and starseeds.
What a fascinating discussion I've had with you today. I am
Oh,
so
Robert,
grateful. Thank you.
it's been such a delight speaking with you, and I really look forward to chatting with you again.
Wow, what a fabulous show tonight. What a fabulous guest. I'd like to thank Lesley Mitchell-Clarke for sharing all this knowledge, this information, and life experience with us here on my side of the crystal ball. This brings us to an end, but before I say goodbye, I have some requests. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. You can also find us on iHeart News Radio. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere else you find your podcast. You can also find me personally, Robert Lindsay Milne, my website, www.robertlindsay.milne.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And now, just before I say goodbye, I'd like to share this with you. Do good. Stay safe, and above all, just be kind. Good night, everybody.